There's nothing more American than
Once weekly Mounjaro could help.
Discover the Ozempic Trizone.
Discover the power of Wegovy.
But Zepbound means change.
Now there's Sky Rizzy.
you can't turn on the TV, scroll Reddit, or stream Hulu without running into 1 or 10 prescription drug ads. But they're not just an annoyance, they're a key part of this huge ecosystem that Big Pharma uses to manipulate you and your choice for medical treatment. I've spent over a decade working behind the scenes in the pharmaceutical ad industry, and today I'm gonna let you in on how drug companies convince you that you need Ozempic, Adderall, or Zoloft, the same way that Colonel Sanders convinces you that fried chicken is the answer to everything. Which, let's be real, he's right. But there's a lot more to it than just bombarding you with TV spots and banner ads. Big Pharma and their marketing agencies that fuel this $40 billion ad industry have built a shockingly sophisticated system to make sure that you and your insurance company pay top dollar for their products, whether you need it or not. So how do we get here? And what's really going on with this industry? The year was 1997. Princess Diana tragically passed away. The Asian financial crisis started, and the Titanic film sank into pop culture history. But something even bigger happened that year. 1997 was the year that the FDA relaxed their rules on how prescription drugs could be advertised, and it changed the entire game. Before 97, any drug ads had to follow something called fair balance, which is fancy industry speak for you gotta show the good and the bad. So drug companies couldn't tell you that this drug is gonna change your life without also saying it could cause heart attacks, nausea, and explosive diarrhea. Ads also had to include the prescribing information, or PI, which is the drug's full instruction manual. They'd have to read off this entire piece of paper within 30 seconds. These restrictions didn't make it worth it to run a bunch of ads. But in 1997, the FDA was like, okay, let's make this easier. With a little help from their friends in Washington, Big Pharma convinced the FDA to allow them to swap out pages and pages of safety text for a quick disclaimer called the Important Safety Information, or ISI. And just like that, Big Pharma went all in. These drug ads went from dull, technical, and long to short, catchy, and emotional, like the ones we see today. Instead of focusing on scientific facts, now these ads show actors dancing their troubles away, jingles so annoying you want to unhear them out of existence, and fake families having a jolly old time. But here's the real thing. These ads don't even care if you need the drug. They just make you think you might, the same way you think you need Captain Crunch over Honey Nut Cheerios, even though we know that Cinnamon Toast Crunch is the true GOAT. And trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes than just creating the Ozempic jingle. 1997 paved the way for the pharmaceutical ad industry the way we know it today. And while today's tactics are 100 times more complex and effective than they used to be, it follows more or less the same playbook that was developed back in the 90s, starting with the marketing of opioids, namely OxyContin, which was FDA approved just 2 years earlier in 1995. I know, we're supposed to be talking about Ozempic, but bear with me, this isn't just another lecture on how bad opioids are. We all know the dangers of oxys now, and we're still cleaning up that mess 30 years later. But from a business perspective, the success of opioids gave Big Pharma execs the new meta for selling drugs. And it goes like this. 1. Invent a drug that requires repeated use to be effective. Bonus points if it requires higher and higher doses over time. 2. Tell people it's life-changing. 3. Tell doctors that it's completely safe and effective. 4. Get as many people as possible to repeat steps 2 and 3. And boom, you've unlocked the infinite money cheat code. And every company moving forward just copy and pasted this strategy for every drug. Just look at Viagra, which was FDA approved in 1998. Shout out to my boomers out there who had to endure this ad.
I used to make love to my wife.
Whenever we wanted.
Since I made the call.
We're making love again and again.
So let's break down how it all comes together, from you learning about a drug to ultimately having bottles and pens in your medicine cabinet. Because what they're doing with Ozempic today is the same it's always been. Picture this. You're watching TV or scrolling through TikTok, minding your own damn business, when an ad comes on. This woman is having the time of her life, dancing her troubles away, talking about how life-changing this drug is. You don't even know what it's for, but something about the ad sticks. Maybe it's the colors, or it's the jingle. Maybe it's the name, Ozempic, Ambien, Adderall. The name rolls off the tongue. They sound like those knockoff brands on Amazon, but somehow more memorable. Or maybe your friend casually mentions that they're on Ozempic and they're losing weight and they're feeling great. Maybe you come across a TikTok of an influencer or celebrity saying, "Not sponsored, but this literally changed my life." Spoiler, it's almost always sponsored. These are entry points. These ads are there to let you know they exist. They're supposed to get in front of as many people as possible. You hear about them, and at first you're like, cool, but these messages are gonna build off each other. Once you've been primed, Big Pharma finds you again, or wherever the hip young people are. They'll hit you with messages like, "I've got a problem, just like you, but look at me now."
When I was diagnosed with HIV, I didn't know who I would be.
But here I am, being me.
Keep being you and ask your healthcare provider about the #1 prescribed HIV treatment.
Ever notice how these ads never tell you what the drug actually does? It's because they're not selling you on a medicine, they're selling you on a lifestyle. So at this point, these problem ads will tell you to go to this website, which doesn't talk about the drug at all, but instead talks about the condition or disease you might have. Little do you know, Big Pharma is the one who created this website. In the industry, this is called an unbranded website. It looks super professional with educational information about this condition and has minimal to zero disclosures that it's made by the drug company. You click around and they'll say, "Hey, we've created this quiz for you. Take it to see if you really have this problem. Now enter your email to get your test results." Spoiler again, you have the problem. I've spent a lot of time working on these. All roads lead to Rome. Now that you know you probably have this condition that you just learned about, you should visit this other website, which actually talks about the drug to fix your problem. While you're here, you can read about how everyone and their mom's lives are better because they take this drug. You can learn about how doctors recommend it for patients just like you. You can look at all these pretty charts about how safe and widely used this drug is. They'll tell you how affordable it is with their patient support program. Because we at Big Pharma want to support patients like you. And when you're done browsing, you're led to believe that you're a great candidate for this drug. Schedule a visit with your doctor and ask about it. And here, take this discussion guide. It has all the talking points you need to broach that conversation with your doctor. Don't be scared, screenshot it and take it with you to your visit. But you're still not convinced.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
You go to the next best resource, social media. So you head over to TikTok for some real advice. But here's the thing, Big Pharma's already there. They pay companies that specialize in combing the internet. Anytime someone posts about how amazing their drug is, they go, "Boost that post, sponsor that person." Meanwhile, anything bad that's said about the drug gets buried in social media purgatory and is almost impossible to find. But even after watching a slew of TikToks and reading about the condition and the drug on Reddit, you're still not convinced. You're gonna sleep on it and give it some real thought before scheduling that doctor's visit. In the meantime, now that Big Pharma has your email from taking that quiz, they're gonna send you an email every few days to check in, reminding you of all the work that you've already put in. Remember that quiz? You must still be suffering. Don't forget about those talking points. You'll need them to guilt trip your doctor. Don't think that you can pay for it? We've got programs to make sure that you can. On top of that, because they know that you've looked up this condition all over the internet at this point, they know they're close to sealing the deal. They target you with Reddit ads, Hulu ads, YouTube pre-rolls, and more influencer testimonials. By the end of this process, you're convinced. Finally, you relent. But when you step back a bit, what you typically don't see is that these ads, website, quizzes, or even influencers are all part of a carefully orchestrated plan. Big Pharma isn't just selling you on a drug. They're selling you on the idea that you need it. I need it! Because you have to feel like you need it to ask for it. It wasn't just a shitty ad with the jingle. So when you get that next reminder email, you go, I've already done all this research. I feel like I'm in the same boat as these influencers who talk about it, and I've got everything I need to ask my doctor. They're medical professionals. Surely my doctor will tell me that if I don't need it, they won't give it to me. Right? Right? I'm just scratching the surface here, and this is just one side of the equation. But now that you've decided that you're going to see the doctor, Big Pharma has to convince them that you need this drug too. And they've got a whole separate playbook for that. So while you're on the path of getting influence under the guise of making your own choice, your doctor follows another path where you both inevitably meet at the other end. You'd think that when you go to your doctor, the prescription they give you is entirely based on science and your needs. But I think you're already sensing that Big Pharma is the invisible hand in the room. Big Pharma spends a lot of time researching and developing drugs, but it all goes to waste if the doctor doesn't prescribe them. So drug companies spend a lot of resources convincing doctors, in many cases more than they spend on you, to convince them to choose their drug over another drug or nothing at all. And like with you, it follows a couple steps. I know this sounds dumb, but hear me out. You've got scientists in the lab throwing this and that together and seeing what sticks. It's like the professor creating the Powerpuff Girls, but inadvertently creating Mojo Jojo instead. A lot of the time, these compounds get created, and the researchers find that they have some sort of effect, whether intended or not. Big Pharma decides if they can use it for something, and they go down the rabbit hole of proving that it's safe and effective for whatever it claims to do. This is a long and arduous process that can take a decade or more. But at the end of the tunnel, the FDA says, okay, we agree that this drug is safe and it works for this reason. In the case of Ozempic, the FDA deemed that it was good for treating type 2 diabetes in 2017. So now, Big Pharma can go out into the world and say, hey doctors, look what our drug can do. But just because a drug is approved doesn't mean that doctors have to prescribe it. So Big Pharma has to show that this drug treats something and it does a better job than anything else that's currently available. Remember when Viagra was supposed to treat high blood pressure? But it turned out that men got hard-ons, and so Big Pharma pivoted that to men's bedside table companion of choice. Look, doctor, Viagra is better than all those sus gas station pills, and the FDA says it's good to go. Ozempic followed a similar story in which patients who were being treated for diabetes found that they were losing a ton of weight. And it worked so well for weight loss, it was actually the patients who were responsible for popularizing it. And soon, doctors were prescribing it off-label, meaning not for the original purpose, to people who were struggling with obesity. So Big Pharma was like, hold up, we're sitting on a cash cow here. This could be bigger than selling opioids. We gotta lock this in, but how can we make this official? We gotta spread the word that Ozempic can and should be used for weight loss. So Big Pharma, specifically Novo Nordisk, put a new hat on Ozempic and called it Wegovy. It's like slapping the Christmas packaging on a can of Coke and telling you that it tastes better in the winter. And they tell the FDA, hey look, a lot of people out there are at risk of dying because they're overweight. And Wegovy reduces that risk by whatever percent. Just look at this data. And because Ozempic, Wegovy's little sister, was already proven to be safe, the FDA was like,
you son of a bitch, I'm in!
Even with this approval, technically, patients still had to meet a certain criteria to be prescribed Wegovy on label. But at least Big Pharma can now go and say to doctors, Wegovy is supposed to be for obese people, but you don't want your patients to get to that level, so have them take it now and reduce their risk of dying. So at this point, you might be thinking, so they just packaged this thing up and sold it as something else? The answer is yes. And in this case, it might not be a big deal, but Big Pharma can take this to dangerous levels, like we've seen with opioids.
Some patients may be afraid of taking opioids because they're perceived as too strong or addictive, but that is far from actual fact.
I'm going to talk more about that and my experiences working in the business in part 2 of this series. Subscribe to watch it when it drops. So now that Big Pharma has convinced the FDA that Ozempic and Wegovy are great for managing obesity and lowering the risk of cardiovascular disease, it's time to convince the doctors. The same goes for any drug really, But first, Big Pharma will have their ad agencies create a slew of materials touting the safety and efficacy of their drug. These take the form of glossy iPad presentations, videos of how the drug works, brochures with patient testimonials, websites just for the doctors, and leaflets with coupons. And they arm the Big Pharma sales force with these tools to go into hospitals and doctors' offices where sales reps educate the doctors. That's right, pretty much every doctor, to this day, listens to pitches from sales reps. Because doctors are busy. They don't have time to sift through medical journals. Big Pharma brings the research to them. Gone are the days of beach blonde babes rolling up to hospitals in Porsches and taking doctors out to lunch. But the reps still deliver the messages effectively. These reps tell the doctor what kind of patients to look out for, how their drug is the best one. And if a patient says this or that, then they're a great candidate and you should really consider them. In fact, you don't even have to commit. Here are some samples. Give them to the right patients and see what they think.
Easy!
And if you run out, don't hesitate to call me. Just go to this website to learn about the drug and put in another sample order. How is this any different from your local plug telling you that your first hit is free? And at this point, if you're like, wait, so I'm influenced to ask about the drug, and my doctor is influenced to say, that's a great idea, try this. Big Pharma is just writing the script for both sides of the conversation? That's right, but the sell gets even better. While this drug works for a lot of patients, it isn't widely covered by health insurance because doctors are prescribing it off-label. This is especially the case with Ozempic and Wegovy. A lot of people going in don't have diabetes or technically aren't obese in the way that Big Pharma told the FDA. But that's okay because the doctors got this huge stack of coupons that make it very affordable. So you go to your doctor and you play out the scripts that Big Pharma gave you both. Your doctor gives you a free sample of Ozempic, you go home, you try it, and it works.
3 weeks later.
Hey doc, I think it's working pretty good. And your doctor's like, awesome, here's a prescription, and take these coupons because insurance isn't gonna cover it. And you go, sweet. You hit up the CVS, you get your injectors, and now you're on Ozempic. Remember how you heard about Ozempic in the first place? Big Pharma runs the ultimate hustle. They get you to want the drug, they get your doctor to want you to have the drug, and they give you a free trial. And by doing so, they turn this choice you've made into monthly recurring revenue, like a subscription to Netflix. And like Netflix, they're jacking up the price again. For a lot of people, this is all fine. But for some people, really shitty things start to happen. Some people have adverse effects. You know, those things that the FDA said that Big Pharma doesn't have to disclose anymore back in 1997. Some people run out of coupons and have a hard time paying for it. Some people can't live without it and turn somewhere else to get their fix because now it's a lifestyle. We've heard this story countless times with a lot of drugs. However, by no means am I saying Ozempic is bad. These GLP-1 drugs are a big deal and they help a lot of people. But have we considered whether they are overprescribed or over-advertised, especially to people who might not actually need them? Every single drug plays out this same playbook, and it's not all bad. But understand that Big Pharma is always looking for ways to expand their applications. And there are some truly groundbreaking treatments out there, just looking for the right patients. People who have no other options, people who would otherwise die. This whole thing is actually a very nuanced topic. But when I hear about blockbuster drugs like Ozempic, I just can't help but draw parallels to what we've already seen in recent history. And if you thought any of this was eye-opening, I'll dive deeper in part 2. Because this is all by design. I'll tell you about all the things I've heard in meetings, how it came to life, how the pharmaceutical industrial complex is a bloated, inefficient, but necessary scam. And the answer to fixing this is not as simple as a Luigi. And the answer to fixing this is not as simple as it looks. Subscribe so you don't miss it. In the meantime, watch these. Thanks for watching.